We actually have moved, sort of moved, we're going to go back and forth. We've moved from New York City to a third tier city in southern Florida. And welcome everybody. Just yesterday, and yesterday/today, we've moved from New York City, which we still love, and we'll go back and forth, to now we're in southern Florida. If you're in southern Florida, oh, thank you, Sans Inc. So someone says my Quora posts are awesome. I should probably post more there in Quora. So yeah, we're coming to you live from southern Florida. And why would we leave New York City? Why? We're kind of within 20 miles of Miami. So if we kind of wanted to have a place that had no winter, and we wanted to have a place where we didn't have to worry about being shamed for not social distancing. People are still social distancing here, but not as much. And yeah, there's no state taxes in Florida. And by the way, in this small town that we're in, we were happy to see there were people protesting. There were 3 young teenage girls protesting on the street corner. And that is a great way to express opinions. Everybody should be able to express opinions without violence and looting. And by the way, I know a lot of my friends who live in New York, and by the way, we still live in New York. We're just now spending some time in Florida. We rented a place for the year in southern Florida, and we hope to go back and forth. Our children, who are all over the age of 18, all 5 of them are going to be living in New York City, so we'll be back and forth. We're in Florida, right near Miami. And the thing is, everybody says New York City is going to bounce back. It bounced back after 9/11. It bounced back after the financial crisis. And let me tell you something. I lived right next to the World Trade Center on 9/11. I was in the World Trade Center 5 minutes before the plane hit it, the first plane hit it on 9/11. My apartment at the time was part of the crime scene in 9/11. So I couldn't even sell it because people were not allowed to visit my house. And so I do think New York City has historically bounced back. Everyone said then New York City wouldn't bounce back, and it did. During the financial crisis, I lived on Wall Street. And yeah, it's a new background because we're in a new house. We'll be back and forth between this house and the old house, and we'll make this background a little nicer. Right now it's just, we haven't even set up this place. We just walked into it, literally, and we turned on the Instagram Live. And here's the things that make New York City different now, and some people are already commenting about it. Matt Capella, Search Decoder, said New York City will not bounce back as fast because a lot of people left due to high taxes and high cost of living. It's not just that. Here's the issue. New York City had to bounce back the last 2 times there was a crisis because there just wasn't here's the reason why someone would like New York City. There's a 1,000,000-to-1 ratio of business opportunities in New York City versus anyone else. If you want to start a business, move to New York City, San Francisco, or LA. There's just no other choice. Maybe Austin, maybe Chicago. But New York City is where all the business opportunities are. New York City has the best, or arguably some of the best. There's almost like a little echo, by the way, to this, but that's okay. Maybe if you open the door.
Okay.
But in any way, Stand Up New York's fine. Stand Up New York's going to open when the economy opens, and I'll be performing there probably the first day Stand Up New York's open, probably the 1st through 12th days Stand Up New York's open. So, by the way, I'm hoping to have open up a comedy club in southern Florida. Or if there's enough people in southern Florida to do comedy, let me know and we'll open up a comedy club. So, but again, New York City, there's a reason why New York City would always bounce back before, and there's a reason why it's not going to bounce back as fast now. And believe me, I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I love New York. We're going to still go back and forth, but I wanted to spend time someplace else. And the business opportunities that were always in New York are not going to be there as much because we're all getting used to virtual conferencing, video conferencing, remote meetings, and so on. So that, and a lot of the people, I've made 20 calls to my New York City friends over the past 2 weeks. None of them were in New York City. I was the only one in New York City. So that tells me that a lot of the business people, a lot of the media people that I trust, and by the way, most media people I don't trust, but a lot of the media people were leaving New York already. So business opportunities are not happening as much in New York City because, and here's the technological change. By the way, good suggestion. Use a hotel bar one night a week to warm up the comedy club. So business opportunities, the bandwidth is here now, the technology is here, where you could have business opportunities from anywhere you live. If you live in Kansas City, Kansas, then you have just as many business opportunities as I did in New York City, because there weren't any meetings happening in New York City anymore. And so we could talk about the kind of business opportunities there will be, but I've already spoken about it quite a bit. We could talk more this time. Feel free to ask questions. Jay's keeping track of the questions. The other thing is, another reason to love New York City is the restaurants and the culture. Well, restaurants, about 50% of restaurants are probably going to be shut down permanently. And much of the culture, like Broadway, huge operas, comedy events at Madison Square Garden, athletic events with huge crowds, all of these things are closed for the moment. And third, there's a lot of fears, and a lot of these are media created, and some of them are real, but there's a lot of fears about second wave of the virus, second season of the virus, another lockdown. No one wants to deal with another lockdown. So all the businesses that are closing, like all the restaurants, it's not like new pizza restaurants are going to reopen to take their place, which means commercial real estate is going to fail in New York City, which is going to be a further drag on the New York City economy. When a local economy is hurt, what are the ways a local economy raises money? Either through ticketing from the police force, or from increased licensing, which is going to further hurt the bottom third of society, or from raising taxes, which is going to cause fewer business opportunities. So, at least for the moment, we decided, let's take a break from New York City. We're going to come back every week, every 2 weeks. It's not like we're abandoning it, but we're going to try to also build a life here in Southern Florida, hopefully with a better background than this, and hopefully with a razor blade. I've got to go shopping. So, yes, I'm always renting. This is a good question from Simon. I'm always renting, and I am never going to buy. So, we're renting a nice place, and again, this is not a permanent thing. We're going to go back and forth between New York City and Southern Florida and the Miami area. I hope to perform at Stand Up New York and all the clubs of New York City sometime soon, but I don't even know when they're going to open. And I hope to perform comedy here in Florida. So, comedy is a bad investment. So Victoria the comedian asks, if comedy is a bad investment, why open one in Florida? You know why? Because some people buy cars I don't even drive, and some people buy into comedy clubs. So for me, my pleasure investment is comedy clubs, but I might not buy one in Florida. I might just perform here. But I'm hearing there's not that many comedy clubs in Miami, so maybe it would be good to do a deal someplace. I know there's a place, the Palm Beach Improv, but I don't know of any other places. So I might try to open something up or do some deal and have comedy. When am I coming back to New Positive Magic Scientist? Asks, when am I coming back to New York City next? Probably within a week and a half before Father's Day. All our kids are up in New York City. So, and maybe, old Jewish people go to Florida, so maybe I'm just turning into an old Jewish person now. So,
yeah, speak for yourself.
Someone says, when am I going to go on the Joe Rogan podcast? I don't know. We'll see. When's he going to come on mine? Let me see. So I want to just summarize. Lots of things are happening. I just had
Is it you or me?
My computer just had a whistle.
Oh wait, that's mine.
Do stand up on IG Live? That's not a bad idea. Maybe one day I will. I sort of like to make these IG Lives kind of funny anyway. Robin, not only did Robin drive me from the airport to this house, I said to Robin this morning, Robin, give me the car keys. I'm going to go out 3 blocks. There's no traffic. I'm going to go out 3 blocks to the Starbucks and get a coffee. And Robin was like angry at me. I am absolutely not giving you the car keys. And I'm like, I could drive. I know how to drive. And she said, you're not legally allowed to drive in any of the 50 United States. Like, you can't drive. If you get into an accident, then you don't have insurance for this car. And I said, fine, I'll pay for this car if it smashes up. And she says, no, you're not driving. And I'm like, what? You think I'm gonna like hit a little baby in the street? And she said, yes, you might. If there's a baby crawling in the street, you might hit that baby. I'm not gonna hit a baby. Just because I legally can't drive doesn't mean I can't drive 3 blocks. But still, she did not let me drive. I don't know what I'm gonna do. She's got me locked as a prisoner in this house. I don't know what's going to happen. I told her, I had therapy this morning, teletherapy. I told her I was gonna tell my therapist on her as retaliation.
He said that. That's so funny.
So
he's tattling on me.
And Andy Monfried, when am I going to visit my friends in Delray? When are you going to invite us? And we'll go to Delray that day. Like, I love Delray and looking forward to visiting. Jay asked me the other day, do you have more friends in Florida or New York City? And quite honestly, all my friends in New York City have left New York City. I have no more friends left in New York City. So other than Victoria, the comedian, and Jay, of course. And, right, Instagram Live is my therapist. Tell her she should let me drive. Well, e-bike to the rescue. I'm waiting for our 2 e-bikes, and then I'm gonna just cruise all around here in the e-bikes. So
see, Robin is right. It's true. You don't have insurance, and you don't have a driver's license.
Yeah, why do I need a license
Bad idea.
to drive? Look.
Because that's the law.
I give talks at law firms to lawyers about the law, so I don't need to have a law degree to give advice to lawyers about the law. I could drive without a driver's license. But
what does that have to do with the driver's license?
Barbara Wayman asked, does it feel better being in Florida? I don't know yet. I think I'm a little bit out of sorts. Uranci99 says women are always right. I do agree with that. I have to agree with that. So I just want to, before we get into some questions, I just want to summarize. There's so many things happening that it's worth kind of summarizing. There's the virus, there's the lockdown, there's the protests, and is there a future? People are questioning, there's the elections, and then people are even questioning, is the American system of capitalism a thing of the past? And Gino Bisconte, hey, Gino, one of my favorite people in the world. Everybody buy this guy's comedy album. It's one of my favorite comedy albums. I've listened to it like 10 times. Gino Bisconte, Bisconte. Uncle Gino is the best, or whatever is the name of the album. So, Gino, where are you doing comedy these days? You should come on here and do comedy. We'll do a split screen at some point and do comedy with you. So, I want to talk about the virus real quickly. This is the thing that's upsetting about the virus. And this leads to the bullshit headline of the day. Every day, as you know, the bullshit headline of the day. And we're going to go to my favorite bullshit website, CNN.com. CNN.com, bullshit headline of the day. It's right at the top. Florida is seeing a surge in coronavirus cases. And we're here in Florida right now. So I was disturbed to see that headline. It is such bullshit. Everyone, and I also saw this about Sweden. Everyone who wants to say bad news, here's the technique. X is seeing more cases than the day before. That's true, because cases never go down, they always go up. There's more cases every day. The more testing you do, the more cases there's going to be. There's more testing right now in every part of the United States. So of course, Florida is seeing a surge in cases. As we've been saying since day one, since the first Instagram Live in early March, the important number is daily new deaths and daily new hospitalizations. Florida, daily new deaths yesterday was 12 in the entire state of Florida, which has, 10 million people or more. And the peak, I'll just look at it right now. The peak was on April 28th with 83 new deaths. Yesterday, 12 daily new deaths. So, CNN called out, bullshit headline of the day, Florida's seeing a surge in coronavirus cases. So effing what? It's out of 10 million people, there were 12 new deaths. And don't forget, this is the state of old Jewish people. So of course, there's going to be some deaths from a coronavirus. Sweden also, I saw on Facebook, somebody was saying Sweden was a horrible mistake. Excuse me, their daily new deaths are at lows also. And yes, their cases are surging. big effing deal again. And so, by the way, let's just go to Cosmopolitan for a good, reliable, neutral. By the way, the New York Times, they just fired one of their best reporters ever, James Bennett. He's been with the New York Times for 20 years. They fired him because he's been promoted to the opinions. You know, New York Times is supposed to be unbiased, fair journalism, and the opinion page is supposed to have opinions from every side. By the way, there's not just two sides, there's thousands of sides. We've been trained in America to think there's the Democrat side and the Republican side. That also is bullshit. Like, the Republicrats are one party, they kind of believe in the same thing, and you're allowed to have differing opinions. So there was an op-ed in the New York Times from, I didn't even read it, right? So I didn't even care because I don't read the New York Times. So there was an op-ed by Tom Cotton, who I guess is a Republican senatorial candidate or senator, I don't even know. And he was talking about, I guess, the difference between looting and protesting, which there's a difference, and it's important to acknowledge that. And so a lot of people protested. So the opinions editor of the New York Times was fired for having a guy who had an opinion, who was a reasonable guy, as a senator. He had an opinion. You can't get fired for that. So I'm not saying, this is not the decline of society. I'm saying society is changing. We're not depending on the New York Times. We're depending on Cosmopolitan.com because they have the best news ever. So Cosmopolitan.com, if you go there right now, the top headline says Black Lives Matter, but it also says fake reports about the protests debunked. You want accurate news. You don't want to make decisions based on inaccurate news. So fake reports about the protests, I'll just look at some of them. First off, the protests, they point out, are not just about George Floyd. They're about Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Breonna Hill, Christian Cooper. There is this simmering anger that is reasonable to peacefully protest. Is looting a part of peaceful protest? Absolutely not. There are so many reports from Baltimore, from Minneapolis, from New York City, where African-American owned businesses were looted. People stole things. You look at St. Louis. Back it up a second. Twitter has become this TV channel for snuff videos. I could go on Twitter right now. Your 4-year-old kid could go on Twitter right now and watch David Dornan, the African-American St. Louis cop who was guarding a TV store. You could watch a video of him bleeding out, his mouth moving, while he dies for 6 minutes on the ground. Yes, I watched the video. And the guy who's taking the video is screaming, all we wanted was some TVs. Okay, clearly this guy was not protesting. He was stealing things and killing people. So then, some people are misquoting Martin Luther King about, Martin Luther King did say the reason people riot is because they're unheard. Rioting happens among the unheard, is what he said. But that is not an excuse. He didn't say that as an excuse to riot. So someone's asking, what does it mean? Will more cities defund the police? And what does it mean? But first I want to talk about what Martin Luther King actually said. In 1956, one of the speeches that really made Martin Luther King, I'm going to answer all the questions about defunding police. It's not happening. Don't worry. Once people realize that defunding police is actually a cornerstone of the Libertarian Party and not the Democrat Party, it's not going to happen. But Martin Luther King, in one of his first speeches, which really catapulted him to leadership, was in 1956 in Montgomery, Alabama, and he said that, that we must blot out the hate and injustice of the older times with the love and justice of new times. This is why I believe so firmly in nonviolence. This is Martin Luther King. Violence never solves problems. It only creates new and more complicated ones. If we succumb to the temptation of using violence in our struggle for justice, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness. And our chief legacy as protesters, our chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos. So anybody who is justifying the looting and saying if you're against the looting, you're a racist, those people are fucking idiots. Excuse my language. Because violence has never solved any of these problems, or at least in the past 100 years or as far back as I could think. Now, if you bring up Malcolm X, people think of Malcolm X as proposing violence to end the problems of the African American community. Malcolm X changed his mind. In 1964, Malcolm X went to Mecca. He converted from being a black Muslim to a Muslim. And not that there's anything wrong with being a black Muslim, it's just a different set of beliefs. And he went against violence for a message of love and peace. Now, here's where he differed from Martin Luther King. He said violence is justified in the case of self-defense. Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Tolstoy and Henry David Thoreau did not say that. They always were about nonviolence. Although Martin Luther King said he could understand how violence could occur in the future if the problems are not solved, he did not say violence should happen as part of protest. So Martin Luther King was for blockades, he was for boycotts, he was for business strikes, he was for peaceful marches, he was for sit-ins, but he was not for looting. He would never have condoned a single looting. War is different, but tell me a war that in the past 100 years that was justified. World War I, nobody can even explain to me what World War I was about. World War II, we weren't even going to get into World War II until Japan invaded Pearl Harbor. It's not like we got into World War II and mythically saved the lives of 6 million Jews. The 6 million Jews were killed. U.S. entering World War II didn't really do much as far as I could tell, except end it. Korean War was a waste. Vietnam War was a waste. We're still in Iraq and Afghanistan. What the heck's going on there? So you gotta be like all the people, including people close to us, who say, no, looting is justified. You gotta be kidding me, because it's not true. Martin Luther King never supported it. No matter how many times people are quoting him, they're wrong. And anyway, we wanted to get away from all of that. So, So let's talk about the defunding of the police just for a second. Minneapolis said they're going to defund the police. No, they didn't. The city council said they were. The mayor, who can veto, will veto. He said he would veto. Now the city council will override that veto. But then the people have to vote on it on the ballot. They're not going to vote for it. New York City, de Blasio said some amount of funds are going to go from the police to children's youth groups. Yeah, children's youth police. So don't worry. They're not defunding the police. By the way, I do think the police should be defunded somewhat, because the main role of the police is to collect traffic tickets for the city. So yeah, get rid of the police. And by the way, if you ask the libertarian candidates for president, listen to my podcast with Spike Cohen, who is the libertarian vice presidential candidate for the country right now. He's in favor of defunding the police. Libertarians want no police, and that's what also these kind of alt-left liberals want. And I don't call them Democrats. They're alt-left. They're something else. So Joe Biden doesn't want to defund the police. It's just ridiculous. Mitt Romney doesn't want to defund the police despite his virtue signaling of walking with the protesters. Look, go walk with protesters. Listen to their issues. That's what you should do. Don't loot. The peaceful protesters are not looting, and the peaceful protesters are going to make change. But anyway, that's the protest.
Yeah, I mean, if you put more money into the children, into the schools and education, you won't need so many police officers.
Maybe.
Policing.
I don't even think you should put money into schools. There shouldn't be any schools.
Well, you have to.
You have to have schools. You have to have schools. All right. So, I wanted to just really quickly summarize. The virus getting better, as I mentioned before on the bullshit headline of the day. Again, less new deaths all around the world. But But trust me, the media will scare you every single day. Here's what I'm going to tell you the bullshit headlines of the next 90 days. Second wave is coming. Surge in, by the way, let's just talk about the hypocrisy of a month ago. If there was a crowd of people, there were people getting fired. Their photographs were being identified and they were getting fired from their jobs because they were not social distancing. Why is social distancing acceptable when there are 50,000 people protesting? Now, there's been social distancing now for 2 weeks. We should be seeing new hospitalizations, but we're not. So I'm not saying the protest shouldn't happen. I'm saying the virus has been gone from New York probably for over a month, and we should not have been doing any social distancing. All the businesses should be open. Anyone who says, I love this phrase, oh, you're okay with the stock market going up, but you're also okay with your grandma being killed? No. First off, my grandma's dead. Second off, I wasn't a huge fan of hers anyway. Third, of either of them. Third, people who were walking around outside were not then going home and infecting their grandparents because the rate of infection is not that great. It's turning out to be not contagious and not as lethal. Even if you were 90 years old and got the coronavirus, the odds are pretty great that you weren't going to suffer severe symptoms or deaths or whatever. So nobody was killing their grandmas. And if you're going to say that, you also have to say the protests were bad. Now, I'm not saying the protests were bad. I'm saying the social distancing rules and guidelines were incorrect. So, and by the way, did the social distancing reduce the number of infections? Probably. But it's also going to be the case that almost everybody at some point or other, like in Sweden, almost everybody will get exposed to this virus one way or the other. When I see people supposedly social distancing outside, they're still touching their face. They're eating with their mask off and then touching their face.
Wear gloves.
We were on the airport yesterday, and while we were eating, I didn't wear the mask. And for 5 minutes afterwards, I didn't wear the mask. And the stewardess comes up to me and says, "Sir, someone has suggested another passenger on the plane has suggested you need to wear your mask." So I put the mask back on. I was being respectful, but it's just kind of BS. We were on a plane, everyone was spread out, and there's 50,000 people in New York City protesting without masks right now. So cleanliness is next to godliness. I agree with that. Unfortunately, I'm not that clean right now. Now, on the economy, we saw some good data on Friday. Stocks are almost at all-time highs again. The economy is going to go great, and it's for the obvious reason. The U.S., just remember these numbers. The U.S. economy is $15 trillion. That's how much people in the U.S. spend every year, give or take. You know, it usually goes up about 2%. Now, the U.S. economy lost about between $2 and $4 trillion worth of spending in the past few months during this lockdown. The stimulus was about $2.5 trillion. There's probably going to be more stimulus. And, hello, Lisa, there's probably going to be more stimulus. And there's also the Federal Reserve has done trillions of dollars worth of extra stimulus on top of the congressionally passed stimulus packages. So that makes sense. These trillions of dollars are moving into the economy. Not everything is hit. I do think all the money that went to businesses has not hit. They should not have given any money to businesses. It all should have gone direct to consumers. But the reason, don't be surprised that the economy is going up. There's trillions of extra dollars in the economy from the bottom. So it's going to surge from the bottom. We're going to see a recession because Q1 and Q2 will be down, and that's the definition of a recession. This is going to be the quickest recession in U.S. history because Q3 is going to be up huge. End of recession. There's not going to be depression. There's not going to be hyperinflation. We printed more dollars. There's a greater supply of dollars, but there's huge demand for dollars. So that keeps inflation in track. Stimulus is like giving crack to a junkie, not a solution. I agree with that, except this is a special situation where the government told us to stay home, so they paid us to stay home. So it's not, don't think of it as a stimulus. Think of it as we were paid to stay home and shut down our stores. So it's different from the usual stimulus.
And plus, isn't it that like every government in the world also went down with us? Like
Yeah,
we
every
all
government-
went down.
the whole
It's not
world
like
went
just
down.
We went down, like everyone did. So
And this is related to a question someone just asked, which I've already answered, but I will answer it again. Someone just said, will the dollar collapse? And the answer is the dollar will not collapse because the value of anything in life is a function of supply and demand. So this is why dating apps are bad, by the way. I'm going to explain why dating apps are bad, and that's why the dollar is not going to collapse, is because dating apps are bad. And so here's what I'll explain. As soon as dating apps like Tinder or even Match.com or whatever were created, everybody on any single night could go on a date. The supply, the demand for a relationship did not increase, but the supply of people willing to have sex increased for everyone. So the value of a relationship went down, and because there was just too much supply and the demand stayed the same. So the value of a relationship went down. So everything, even relationships, are a function of supply and demand. The more dating apps there are, the less value people will place in a relationship. The value of a relationship will collapse. It's the same thing with the dollar. So the value of the dollar is based on supply and demand. But too many people focus on supply. So yes, trillions of dollars of supply were added to the money supply. And if you Google M2 money supply, you will see charts that the money supply is increasing in the US. But the demand for the dollar is also increasing. Where else are you going to put money? You're going to put it into the Chinese renminbi or yuan, whatever they call it. You're going to put it into the Argentinian peso. You're going to put it into the euro, which is going to collapse when they bail out Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. You're going to put it into the pound. Maybe you'll put it into the pound, but why put it into last century's losers when you could put it into this century's winners? And then you could say, well, is the U.S. going bankrupt? No. The U.S. as a whole has $330 trillion in assets and only $120 trillion in debt. That's better than most human beings. So the U.S. is the wealthiest country by far in the world. So there's huge. I was talking to a governor of the Federal Reserve, one of the top people of the Federal Reserve. He said the problem they're having is they want inflation, but there is so much demand for the dollar. They can't even print enough to take care of the demand from outside the U.S. for our dollar. So there's not going to be hyperinflation. I have a $1 trillion bill on the floor over there as I was unpacking. Oh yeah, let me just see that. Let me explain something about hyperinflation. This is a $10 billion bill from Zimbabwe. $10 billion. Why did Zimbabwe have hyperinflation? It's because they owed debt in US dollars. So they printed up, I don't even know what the heck you call this. What do you call African Zimbabwe currency?
I don't know. I didn't live in.
So this is
The CD is in Ghana, but I don't know.
So whatever you call this, it's worthless, and it's printed up by the Reserve. It says the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. They printed more of these up in order to pay down debt that they owed in US dollars. We, in the United States, we don't owe debt in euros. We owe debt in US dollars. So we will print to pay off that debt, or we will restructure the debt. But when a country has the debt in the same denomination as the currency, it is 1,000 times harder to have hyperinflation. Very important thing to know. So when you're at a cocktail party and some know-it-all says, well, there's going to be hyperinflation, just tell them, well, where else would you put your currency? Because demand has spiked for the US dollar. Second, give me an example of hyperinflation where the debt was in dollars, it was in currency different from the country's currency. So Germany in the 1920s, their currency were marks, but they owed dollars and pounds. The Argentina in 1982, their currency is pesos, and they owed debt in dollars. Zimbabwe, I don't know what the heck this currency is, but they owed debt in dollars. So Asia, Thailand in 1997, the Thai baht was collapsing, but because they owed debt in dollars. So yes, the U.S. has put everyone else into hyperinflation. We're the evil imperial debtors, but we won't go into hyperinflation. What's another issue happening is elections. So right now on predicted.org, Joe Biden, for the first time, has had an enormous surge over Trump. And I don't know if this is justified or not. I think Trump, between the pandemic, between the lockdown, between these protests, I don't know if Trump could have handled it better or something different. But the reality is we're right before the Democratic National Convention. So the Democratic candidate always surges in the polls right before the Democratic Convention. Just like, by the way, the Republican candidate always surges right before the Republican convention. The other thing that's really important to realize is that, the other interesting thing in the elections, which I'm actually betting on right now, is Joe Biden is vetting his vice presidential nominees. And who are the candidates? So I bet on these things on predicted.org. So I don't listen to any polls, but I do put money where my mouth is. It's what Nassim Taleb, who, by the way, is kind of weird. I will comment. I love Nassim Taleb's books. He's a smart guy. He posted a picture of himself on an airplane. He was wearing 3 surgical masks and I think he was wearing like a mini ventilator to be safe on the plane. Nassim, relax. Maybe your life is important, maybe it's not, but you probably don't need 3 surgical masks. But I love his book, Skin in the Game. When it comes to the vice presidential candidate, I now have skin in the game. I'm officially betting on, it's a long shot. Kamala Harris is the front runner, but I'm not betting on her. It's 46 cents to bet on her, but I'm betting on Atlanta's mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms. She had a pretty good speech during these protests. She's an African-American woman. I think Kamala Harris has a really poor track record towards minorities in her track record as a district attorney. So Keisha Lance Bottoms, I think, will be a good pick for Joe Biden. By the way, trust me when I say Joe Biden is like a puppet, and whatever bad things you think will happen if Joe Biden is elected probably won't happen. Whatever good things you think will happen probably won't happen either. So nothing really matters. I don't think this election matters at all. Democrat or Republican, it's going to be good for me because it's going to be good for both of us because we have ideas. Anyone who writes down 10 ideas a day and exercises their idea muscle, it just does not matter who wins some silly election. So Robin Altucher for VP, I will vote for that. She would be a great vice president. And
no, because that means I'd have to be president if I was with.
Yeah, here's the problem with being a president.
I don't want to be president.
Here's the problem with being president. At least once during your presidency, you have to order someone's death. Like every president has had to order millions of deaths, and I don't really like that. But I'll tell you all my bets. So here's where I'm probably going to lose. I bet that Joe Biden would not be the Democratic nominee. I thought his cognitive decline was too great. I bet on that at 15 cents, and now it's 9 cents. So I'm losing. I'm losing badly on that. 2010 presidential election winner, I made a small bet. It's not important. Next justice to leave the Supreme Court, I'm betting on Stephen Breyer because everyone else is betting on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I'm getting 14-1 odds. I'm happy with that. And the Democratic VP nominee, I am betting on Keisha Lance Bottoms. I bet on her at 9 cents, and she's currently trading at 11 cents. So I'm 20% up on that bet. But I'm not taking it off yet because I think it's going to happen. All right. Anything else happening in the news that's important? So I covered virus, economy, lockdowns, which never should have happened. There will never be a lockdown again, by the way. Never again. People don't realize this very important fact. Homeless people have a mortality rate 9 times higher than non-homeless people. So when you have 40 million jobs that are lost, then you're going to have many more deaths. It's just common sense. And they messed up every step of the way. The ventilators killed people. The nursing homes killed people. They're just going to have better policies next time. It's sad, unfortunately, that they did these lockdowns here. I wish we had done Sweden's strategy. Tell me more about your best-selling book. I don't know. I think Robin Altucher for next Supreme Court justice, but be careful when you say that. I won't say why. Why did you recommend checkers other than poker in that order in a 2014 Twitter Q&A? I'm not sure when I recommended checkers over poker. I think checkers is a great game to learn how to play games. Poker, here's the difference between checkers and poker. Checkers, there's perfect information. Nobody is hiding anything. You know what their status is, they know what your status is. Poker, there's uncertainty. There's always odds because you don't know what the next cards that are to come. So it's just different kinds of games. They're both good games. Checkers, the one thing about checkers, by the way, is that it's more intellectually satisfying than people think. Try to play a good checkers player. Oh, I'll tell you a story. Do you mind if I tell a story about checkers?
I love it.
So one time I had a job and my boss had a mistress, and he had a wife and a mistress, and it was his mistress's 40th birthday. It was actually her 50th birthday party, but they were calling it her 40th birthday party. She wouldn't admit to being 50. So it was her 50th birthday party, and in the middle of this party, my boss had already wasn't liking me for some reason, so he had been taking checkers lessons every week from a world checkers champion for like 30 years. And so he challenged me in the middle of this party to a checkers match. And so I crushed him in checkers. Checkers is a hard game. I crushed him in checkers, and the next day he fired me.
Didn't anyone tell you not to do that? You can't crush your boss.
To be fair,
in front of his
yeah, there were 50 people surrounding the game. And to be fair, I was winning the second game and I let it end in a draw.
Okay.
The first game I won, the second game was a draw.
Okay.
So, but I was winning and I decided, you know what, I better relax because he was turning red. I thought he was going to have a heart attack.
Oh no.
And the next day he wrote me, I don't want to have any financial relationship with you. And I said, unfortunately, you owe me money. So you have to pay me that money and then we can now have a financial relationship.
Dear.
So he paid me the money and that was funny.
Crazy. So,
by the way, he was my former boss was a world-class athlete. He was a world champion of his particular sport. Someone asked a good question. How would we educate kids who don't have educated parents or mentors to help them without schools? Well, you need something. You need either schools or educated parents or mentors. But more important than, think about what you learned in elementary school. What do you still use now? Do you handwrite? When's the last time you wrote a script cue?
That's all changing though.
A script cue is like a 2?
I know, but they haven't taught that in a while. That's just what we learned.
Okay, we didn't have computers. What math do you use? Okay, when was the last time you used geometry? Like, do you use the Pythagorean theorem every day? Or do you use trigonometry? Like, when's the last time you need to calculate a sine or a cosine? And okay, they don't teach that in elementary school, but they teach it in junior high school. When I write on a waiter's pad, I write with block letters. I don't even write cursive. Good question, Victoria. You called me out there.
What they should teach kids, though, are skills like, life skills.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily, this high-end math, but just like trades and skills like, adulting.
Yeah. What adult skills?
Well, like how to, not balance a checkbook, but how to manage, your life, how to pay your insurance, how to do, no one knows how to do that. How to do your taxes, how to, just how to live.
Or I also think
parents don't teach that.
I also think how to explore interests. So a lot, like right now, schools teach to the test. So W said no child left behind. So he created standardized tests, and now every school only teaches the things that gets their kids higher grades on tests. It's almost like we're creating a generation of robots. It's what England did in the early 1800s because they knew that if everybody was trained the same, they could take somebody out of ruling over South Africa and put them in New Zealand, and then they could put someone from New Zealand into India, and they could put someone from India into, I don't know, the Cayman Islands or wherever. Mm-hmm. And so everybody had to be educated the same. So we're doing the same to our kids now. Whereas teach kids how to find interests. Like maybe some kids are interested in cooking, some kids are interested in knitting, some kids are interested in electronics or computer programming.
They're doing that in Singapore. Like they started doing that.
So that's good.
right? So they go into they find out what their interests are, and then that's all they study, right? So
That's
they're
good.
interested
But then can they switch interests easily?
don't know
So
about
in
that.
England right now, like starting
Yeah.
around the level of 10th grade, you have to pick a career and only get educated in that career, and then you're penalized for switching. So as long as you're not, like, I've had 15 different careers. I went from software to writing to TV to software again to entrepreneurship to hedge funds to writing about finance to being on TV about finance to running a hedge fund to on and on to podcasting and so on. Joel Waldman, she is my girl. She is very pretty. Thank you. Are my kids attending college? One is about to graduate college, but college in England, which is a 3-year college and it's much cheaper. One dropped out of college. One is not going for a while. One we'll see. And two are not going. So altogether, 3 are not going. One's
No.
graduating. One we'll see.
Yeah.
And then do I have them all?
Three.
3, 1, 1. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, 3, 1, 1, yeah.
So look, the other thing is, I'm not going to say to my kids, you're not allowed to do something. Like, let them make their own mistakes. But
Even if we said that, they would
yeah,
say,
even if I
"Screw off."
said don't go to college, and if I don't want them to hate me, because when they're 25 and 26 years old and they have real problems in life, I want them to know that they could come to me. But 3 of the kids are not going to college, and one's graduating computer science. I think he shouldn't have gone there, but he's my stepson. I didn't know him then.
And the other one's going to go next year.
And the other one's probably going to go next year. We'll see.
Taking a gap year.
Hopefully she'll take a gap year. So let's go to the, okay. Someone's asking my thoughts on buying and trading currencies. Is currency trading a good idea? Are you kidding me? Currency trading is the worst idea, and I'll tell you why. What edge, if you wake up in the morning and you think you have an edge versus this Saudi Arabian king and George Soros and the Queen of England and the head of the EU, they're the ones manipulating the currencies all day long. You don't have any edge against them. So they're betting trillions of dollars on currencies every day, and you think you could bet against them that you have an edge? So currency trading is just the worst idea. What about digital voting? Will that be bad because foreigners and dead people can vote? That's from Victoria the comedian. Victoria, very funny. No wonder you're a comedian. Foreigners and dead people will not be able to vote in electronic voting. I do think digital voting is a pathway to a real democracy. Like, why is Congress? Let me just tell you, the reason for Congress. Okay, someone's asking for my thoughts on Soros. I will give that an insight. The constitutional reason for Congress is because it took 6 days for somebody to go from Philadelphia to Baltimore in the 1700s. 6 days. That's how long it took Thomas Jefferson to get from Philadelphia to Baltimore. Now it takes 15 minutes on the Amtrak train. So the reason for Congress is because it was the only way to get everybody together in one room so they can vote. But what has that also led to? It's led to a two-party political system, which is ridiculous. Why should we only have 2 parties? It's not like there's only 2 menus that we can choose from. We have choice of thousands of restaurants in the United States. Here's my first solution is keep congressmen or representatives should only be allowed to vote when they're sitting in their home districts, because then lobbyists can't go over and influence all of them. Second, let's just have a real democracy. Just digital. The reasons for Congress no longer exist. Let's just have people vote on every single law and issue across the country using digital voting. And of course, you have to make sure that there's no fraud and you have to make sure that there's no hacking. But that's like with everything. So same thing with the Electoral College. I mean, the reason for the Electoral College was to have slave owners keep their rights, because the North had more people than the South. So they created the Electoral College. Now, the problem with the Electoral College now is if you get rid of it, New York City, LA, San Francisco, and Chicago will be the oligarchy voting for all of our presidents, but maybe that's okay. You don't know till you'll try it. In the past 150 years, only in 1888, in 2000, and in 2016 were there candidates who won, but they did not win the popular vote. So let's just see what happens. Who knows? All right. What's the next step after self-publishing your book? This is from Camellia Yang. Good question. Camellia, by the way, what's the name of your book? She just published her very first book using self-publishing ideas. Congratulations, Camellia. I'm glad you've been listening to this IG Live, and I hope that we were of some help to you in self-publishing your book. Say the name of your book if you're on right now. But the next step after self-publishing your book is, again, spoke and wheel. Start taking ideas and chapters from your book, posting them on LinkedIn, posting them on the Huffington Post, putting them on Medium, putting them as questions. Start answering tons of questions on Quora and have in your bio a link to your a link to your book. Post on Instagram and provide a link to your book. Do a podcast and talk about your book, or do a podcast around the issues of your book. So her book, by the way, is about third culture people. So it's based on a conversation you two had across this IG Live. So
yeah, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so Camellia, congratulations. And the other thing I will suggest is, again, your idea, which is about the experiences of third culture people, is very important. Now it's spoken wheel. The spokes are, that's the wheels, is your idea. The spokes are book, podcast, articles, answering questions on Quora, giving talks, doing consulting, doing coaching. Do as much as possible. Don't do ads. You don't need to do that. Do Instagram posts, do TikTok videos, tweet about it. Get involved in the conversation and in the communities on LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on Reddit. Get involved. There are many communities that are related to your book. Get involved, and this is for anybody who writes a book. So and then also I will say, write the second book, the best marketing. So Hugh Howey wrote the science fiction bestseller Wool. There's going to be a movie or a TV series based on it. He self-published that. That was his 15th book. His first 14 books sold 4 copies each. His 15th book sold 1 million copies, and then everyone, including me, bought all the back books. So yeah, start a newsletter, do an online course, spoke and wheel your book. But let me just talk for a second about starting a podcast. Here's what you need to do about starting a podcast. And Jay will disagree with me, but all you need is the recorder on your phone that you could speak into. Hey, phone, this is my recorder. And then upload to Libsyn, and now you have a podcast. Boom. So everybody should do a podcast. Look, I do a podcast. I'm going to pick anybody of you out. Camellia, Victoria, Cody, Robert. You should all do podcasts. You know why? Who cares if you get listeners? Your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren are going to want to hear what you were about, what you sounded like. So do a podcast that talks about your life. Post it to Libsyn, Apple Podcasts, Omni, wherever. And now your descendants can hear your voice and enjoy it. Jen Glantz, she should do a podcast. Jen has a very interesting side hustle. Jen, why don't you talk about what your side hustle is just real quickly, and I'll describe it. Jen Glantz is a bridesmaid for hire. So sometimes, and I'm not going to explain it correctly, some weddings don't have bridesmaids to help. Bridesmaids have a lot of work to do. They have to help organize things. The wedding organizer doesn't do it. And Jen Glantz has a podcast about it. So being a bridesmaid for hire was the wheel. Am I right, Jen? And then she had different spokes. She had a podcast. She wrote articles. She has a book. She does speaking. And now she has a good, profitable business as a bridesmaid for hire. So the spoke and wheel approach works. It's not that hard to self-publish a book. It's not that hard to start a podcast. It's trivial to answer questions on Quora. 5 years will 50,000 people want to work for her, is what she just said on the IG Live. So all of this approach works. So of the spoke and wheel approach, that's how you build a business. That's how you market a book. That's how you market a podcast. Victoria keeps asking who's in the pictures. It's her 3 children when they were little kids. All right, I'm gonna get back to more questions. How do you source businesses to acquire? So I talked with Carl Allen in my podcast about buying small businesses that are for sale. And I talked on this podcast on Friday about how you could buy and start your own huge business with almost no money by buying, people always say, oh, there's a 90% failure rate of starting a business. A, that's not true. But B, there's almost no failure rate if you buy an already existing profitable business. So that's what you should do. Entrepreneurs should first buy a profitable business rather than start one. And I describe how in my podcast and in the IG Live last Friday. But how do you source it? Guess what? Your accountant knows everybody whose business is for sale. Call up your accountant or your friend's accountants and ask them, hey, you're in the business of you want to buy a laundromat and you want to buy 50 laundromats maybe, but you start off with the first one. Ask your accountant for advice. What's a good laundromat to buy? Most businesses, 90% of businesses shut down rather than sell. So anybody will be happy to take almost any offer from you because it's better than just shutting down your business. So call your accountant, call your lawyer. They'll know of businesses that are shutting down that are good, profitable businesses. Remember, businesses might shut down because of death, because of debt, because of disease, because of divorce. There's lots of reasons that people might want to sell a good, profitable business. So that's how you source businesses. Let's see, what's a good question? Jay, what do I think of the New York City real estate market? Shit. That's what I think. If you own a building and there's a storefront in the building that was a pizza restaurant and that pizza restaurant goes out of business, who's
Soros, they said.
Oh, that's another question. All right.
Yeah.
But who's gonna move into that pizza restaurant that was in your building? Nobody. Zero. And you can't just put another business there. It's set up like a pizza restaurant. So commercial real estate is going to they're going to have their own financial crisis. They're going to probably need to get bailed out. There's going to be billions and tens of billions of dollars in debt that's not going to get paid back. So that's a serious situation. Okay, my opinion on George Soros. I kind of think I don't know enough, and here's the reason I don't know enough. Because whenever I hear people talking about George Soros, it's usually almost like code word for conspiracies. Like George Soros is burying bodies in the backyard or whatever. Like George Soros wants to implant a chip into everybody's brain so he can control them. I think George Soros is like 110 years old. Like he's not, let me see if I can find, here's what I think of George Soros. It sums up in one picture that I once found of him. Let's see if I can find that picture here right now. Yeah, here we go. This is what I think of George Soros. Unplug the computer. Can you see? This is what I think of George Soros. He's trying to grab the knee of a young woman who is pulling away from him, and he's oblivious to it. He's just laughing, and both these women he's trying to grab are looking away or pulling away from him. That's what I think of George Soros. Like, I just think he's kind of a rich loser. Like, just because you're rich doesn't mean you're not a loser. You could be rich and just have really just poor values about anything. Now, maybe, what about his political beliefs? I don't know. Some people say he was a Nazi, and some people say he's not. That's the only thing I know about his political beliefs, is that people are confused as to whether he was a quasi-Nazi or not. I have no idea. I don't even know if he was alive. I guess he was alive during World War II. He's like 170 years old now. And he's probably, if you inject the plasma of a baby into your blood, then you could live as if like you're the baby. There's research on this for mice and stuff. So he probably just injects the plasma of babies once a week. And that's another conspiracy theory for you. So, I don't know. It just seems to me, and his stock picks are not all that great. He's not really involved in stocks that much anymore. He got lucky with the English pound. He became a billionaire off of that when he bet against the English pound. He also bet 4 tech stocks from 2000 to 2001, and he lost a ton of money on that. But here's the thing about hedge fund managers. Hedge fund managers, just so you know, so George Soros is a hedge fund manager. You might know of others. Hedge fund managers don't make money from good investing. They make money by charging their customers lots of fees. They have to have 1 or 2 good years, which anybody can have during a good time, and then they make a ton of money on the fees. And then they might be poor investors after that. I know investors who are not even break even as investors, but they're billionaires